spent time this week, heartbreaking time actually, with a woman who is not a member of our congregation, who has no hope. She has no hope for her present circumstances and no hope for her future when those circumstances inevitably change. She has no faith, no community. She is bitter, angry, and so full of despair that it rolls off her in waves. That despair and bitterness that she feels have made her socially isolated and very much alone. But she persists very stubbornly in her attitude. Even though life did a 180-degree turn on her, she's not going to change the original plan. She's not going to ask for help. Unfortunately, that plan is now impossible to implement. Every suggestion made her as potential sources of help or relief for her situation and her most serious need was met with an emphatic negative response. Her despair, her lack of hope, her lack of faith have rendered her helpless, incapable of being helped by external forces. Help will have to come from within for her. It's truly a sad situation. Now contrast that with the widow in today's gospel. Here's a woman with presumably no means of income or support, who most likely won't survive without help. In her mind, she has no choice but to demand justice, to beg for help, to persist until she gets what she needs and deserves. The unjust judge keeps putting her off until she presumably drives him nuts. I can see her stalking him, meeting him on every street corner, ambushing him outside the restaurant, raising her voice above others in the crowd until her voice is heard, and eventually she is rewarded what she is due. So all of this leads to the question of, how do we ask for help, if we even do ask for it? Because sometimes we stubbornly believe we can go it alone. But let's say we agree we need help. Do we stalk it, demand it, persist in it, beg for it, pray for it, give up and quit? I am very certain of one thing, and that is that at some point in our lives, all of us will need help beyond what we can do for ourselves. I'm not ashamed of that, and neither should you be. I've sought counseling at difficult times in my life. I've used crutches when I was injured. I still meet with a spiritual advisor once a month who continues to support me in my journey with faith. I can't do it alone. So how do we know where help can be found? On a practical level, some of it starts right here at St. Philip's, with the ministries that your time, talent, and pledges support. You read a list of what help is available in the budget narrative that was handed out last week. At least I hope you read it, which looks like this. We have ministries that help us worship. Ministries that help us to learn about our faith and what it means to love God and each other. Ministries that support our parishioners, like pastoral counseling, bereavement help, and Stephen ministry. And with practical support like transit assist and the health equipment library. Then there are the ministries that support our community, like the Monday lunch, diaper ministry, and street reach. And as that narrative lists, there are many, many more. Yet for the ultimate source of help, Jesus says, there's prayer. Jesus says we need to pray always and not to lose heart. That is the widow's faith, the determination that we read about today. Day after day she shows up. Day after day she speaks of the injustice done to her. Day after day she persists in holding her pain up before the judge, the world, and God. But to pray always doesn't mean giving God a to-do list and then sitting back expecting God to magically fix everything. To pray always means that we offer our cry to God, and then we do whatever we can to bring about the change we seek, trusting that God is already doing what God needs to do. Maybe that means we seek counseling or a support group. We feed the hungry. We offer compassion to the grieving. We speak and teach against hatred and prejudice, respecting the dignity of every human being. We strive for justice and peace. We make our case not just before God, but with God. We join God in answering our prayer. Now, some may believe that prayer is about convincing, persuading, or wearing God down, so God will do what we ask. But God's not like the unjust judge in this story. God's like the widow, chasing after us, begging us to listen. We don't have to persuade God to show up and act. He already has. We may think our prayers are unanswered, that we wait and we wait for justice or healing. But God gives us not necessarily what we most want, but what we most need. He sees our suffering, He hears our cries, and He grants our prayers in His own way. Now, seemingly out of keeping with the rest of this gospel, I will say that the last verse of this parable has bothered me from the first time I read it. And yet, when the Son of Man returns, will He find faith on earth? I could not make that fit. It's almost as if Jesus envisions us throwing up our hands and saying, I quit. I'm done. I'm not waiting anymore. But I've come to understand that our faith, like the widow's faith, always involves waiting. How long? When will it change? I have no idea. But waiting doesn't mean that God is absent, uncaring, or not already active in our lives. You see, the widow doesn't wait on God. She waits with God. To pray always is what keeps her from losing heart, from falling into despair. It keeps her showing up day after day, trusting that God sees, hears, and acts. You see, Luke shows us in this parable that perseverance in prayer and not losing heart are vital elements of our faith. To pray always is what keeps us present to and in relationship with God, in thought, word, and deed, so that when God does act, we'll be there. Imagine the tragedy if one day the widow gave up, if she let despair claim her, and that was the day the judge ruled in her favor. That was the day her life would have changed. I wonder how much of God's life, love, compassion, forgiveness, and healing we may have missed because we simply didn't show up, didn't listen, didn't hear. To pray always ensures that we're present so that when the Son of Man comes, He will find faith on earth. He will find us, the widows of the world, who refuse to let the unjust judge have the final say. There's a quote from theologian Karl Barth that says, "To clasp the hands in prayer is the beginning of an uprising against the disorder of the world." Yes, I think that we can look at that in a general sense, certainly of justice for all, but also as through prayer, we begin to create order in our own personal worlds. To pray always is to live in hope. To pray always is to conquer despair. To pray always is to ensure that the faithful will still be here when the Son of Man returns.